Most men think trust is built through big gestures, expensive gifts, or constantly trying to impress a woman. But after years of listening to people open up about their relationships in private conversations, I can tell you something that surprises almost everyone. Trust is usually built in the smallest moments, not the loudest ones. It grows quietly, sometimes so quietly that people do not even notice it happening until one day, she starts turning to you emotionally before anyone else. That is what this video is really about. This will make her trust you. Over time is not about manipulation, tricks, or pretending to be perfect. It is about understanding the emotional habits that make someone feel safe around you without forcing anything. And honestly, this is where many relationships either slowly become stronger or slowly fall apart. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about something deeper than attraction. Because attraction can happen quickly, but trust takes time, consistency, and emotional awareness. I have spoken to people who stayed in relationships for years with someone they were attracted to, yet still never fully trusted them emotionally. And I have also seen relationships where the emotional connection became so strong because one person simply knew how to make the other feel understood, respected, and emotionally safe. That difference matters more than most men realize. One thing I noticed over the years is that many people do not lose trust because of one huge betrayal. Sometimes trust disappears little by little through disappointment, inconsistency, emotional distance, or feeling unheard. On the other hand, trust can also grow little by little through patience, honesty, calm communication, and emotional stability during difficult moments. Those are the things people remember privately, even if they never say it out loud. So in this video, we are going to break down the behaviors, mindset shifts, and emotional patterns that slowly make a woman trust you more deeply over time. Some of these points may challenge the way you currently think about relationships, but if you truly understand them, they can completely change the emotional dynamic between you and the person you care about. 1. Consistency over charm. One thing that surprises a lot of people is that trust is rarely built through intense moments. It is usually built through repeated behavior. In therapy conversations over the years, I have noticed that many women do not emotionally relax around a man because he is exciting, smooth, or charismatic. Those things may create attraction in the beginning, but trust is different. Trust comes from emotional predictability. It comes from knowing who you are going to be tomorrow, not just who you are during the best moments. I remember speaking to someone who once said something that stayed with me for a long time. She explained that the reason she finally trusted her partner was not because he said perfect things. It was because after months of stress, misunderstandings, work pressure, family issues, and emotional moments, he remained emotionally steady. She said, "I stopped feeling like I had to guess who he was." That sentence explains more about trust than most relationship advice ever will. A lot of men believe they need to constantly impress a woman to keep her emotionally connected, so they become overly performative in the beginning. They text constantly for a few weeks, make huge promises, give endless attention, then slowly disappear emotionally once real life becomes difficult. What creates emotional damage is not always betrayal. Sometimes it is inconsistency. Someone who is warm one week and emotionally unavailable, the next creates confusion, and confusion slowly weakens trust. People feel safest around emotional consistency because it lowers anxiety. It allows someone to emotionally breathe around you instead of constantly wondering where they stand. What many women pay attention to is not the version of you that appears during romantic moments. They watch how you behave during ordinary days. Do you still communicate respectfully when stressed? Do you disappear emotionally during conflict? Do your actions match your words over time? These things matter deeply because trust grows through patterns. And honestly, some men underestimate how closely emotional patterns are observed in relationships. A woman may not always verbally mention every detail she notices, but emotionally, she feels the difference between stability and unpredictability very quickly. One thing I often tell people is this: charm can attract attention, but consistency creates emotional safety. A man who constantly changes his behavior based on mood, ego, or temporary feelings can unintentionally make a relationship feel emotionally unstable. Meanwhile, a man who consistently shows patience, honesty, and emotional maturity creates something much deeper than attraction. He creates reliability. And reliability is what slowly allows someone to lower their emotional guard over time. When a woman begins to feel that your care for her is not temporary, performative, or dependent on convenience, trust starts forming naturally without force. That process is slow, quiet, and sometimes invisible in the beginning, but it becomes the foundation of a strong emotional connection later on. 2. Listening without defending. One of the biggest mistakes many men make in relationships is believing that every emotional conversation is an attack that needs to be defended against. The moment a woman says she feels hurt, ignored, disconnected, or misunderstood, some men immediately switch into explanation mode instead of understanding mode. They start interrupting, justifying themselves, correcting details, or trying to prove why they are technically right. But something I have learned from years of hearing people talk honestly about their relationships is this. Most women are not looking for perfection during emotional conversations. They are looking for emotional presence. They want to feel heard before solutions, logic, or defenses enter the conversation. And when that does not happen repeatedly, trust slowly weakens because she begins to feel emotionally alone even while speaking directly to you. I remember listening to someone describe why she stopped opening up emotionally in her relationship. What stood out was that she did not say her partner was cruel or abusive. She said every conversation became exhausting because she constantly felt like she had to defend her feelings. Every time she expressed disappointment, he focused more on proving his intentions than understanding her emotional experience. Over time, she stopped feeling safe enough to be vulnerable because vulnerability started feeling like a debate instead of a connection. That happens more often than people realize. Many relationships do not collapse because people stop caring. They collapse because people stop feeling emotionally understood. A lot of men were never taught how powerful calm listening actually is. They assume leadership in a relationship means having answers all the time. But emotional maturity often looks quieter than that. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is sit still long enough to truly hear someone without immediately protecting his ego. That does not mean accepting disrespect or becoming weak. It means creating enough emotional space for someone to express themselves honestly without feeling dismissed, corrected, or emotionally punished for speaking up. When a woman feels safe expressing uncomfortable emotions around you, trust grows naturally because emotional safety is being created in real time. One thing many men misunderstand is that listening is not passive. Good listening is active emotional awareness. It is paying attention to tone, emotional shifts, body language, and what is being said underneath the actual words. Sometimes when a woman says, "You never listen to me," what she really means is, "I do not feel emotionally important to you right now." Those are two completely different things. Men who learn how to hear the deeper emotional message behind words often build stronger emotional connections because they stop reacting only to surface-level statements. And honestly, one sincere moment of calm understanding can build more trust than 10 romantic speeches. A woman remembers how you respond when emotions become uncomfortable. Does she feel emotionally safe with you or emotionally exhausted after opening up? That answer shapes trust more than most men realize. The men who build lasting trust are usually not the loudest, smoothest, or most impressive. They are often the ones who make a woman feel emotionally heard without turning every difficult conversation into a battle for pride, control, or ego. 3. Staying calm. During conflict. One of the fastest ways to destroy trust in a relationship is making a woman feel emotionally unsafe during difficult moments. And emotional safety is not only about physical behavior, it is also about emotional reactions, tone, pressure, intimidation, withdrawal, and unpredictability during conflict. Something many men fail to realize is that women often pay closer attention to who you become during stress than who you are during peaceful moments. Anyone can appear loving when everything feels easy, but conflict reveals emotional maturity very quickly. Over the years, I have heard countless people describe the exact moment they emotionally pulled away from someone, and surprisingly, it was not always because of cheating or betrayal. Sometimes it was because arguments became emotionally draining, explosive, dismissive, or emotionally unstable. They no longer felt emotionally protected inside the relationship. I remember one conversation where someone explained that the reason she deeply trusted her partner was not because they never argued. In fact, they disagreed often. But she said something powerful. Even when he was upset, I never felt emotionally afraid to talk to him. That sentence says a lot. Many men think trust comes from being dominant in conflict, winning arguments, or shutting emotional conversations down quickly. But long-term trust is usually built by emotional control, not emotional intensity. A man who can remain calm, respectful, and emotionally balanced during tension creates a sense of stability that many women rarely experience. And stability creates trust. A lot of men were raised to suppress emotion until frustration explodes. So instead of calmly communicating discomfort early, they bottle things up until conflict turns into irritation, cold silence, aggression, or emotional shutdown. The problem is that repeated emotional unpredictability slowly teaches a woman to walk on eggshells around you. She starts overthinking how to bring up problems. She becomes careful with her words. Eventually, communication stops feeling safe. And once emotional safety disappears, trust usually starts disappearing quietly alongside it. Something important men need to understand is that staying calm during conflict does not mean becoming passive or allowing disrespect. It means learning how to regulate yourself emotionally before responding impulsively. There is a huge difference between expressing frustration with maturity and making someone feel emotionally overwhelmed. A calm man listens before reacting. He asks questions instead of escalating tension immediately. He controls his tone even when emotions are high. He understands that the goal of conflict should not be emotional domination. The goal should be understanding and resolution. In many relationships, women begin trusting a man more deeply when they notice that his behavior stays emotionally steady under pressure. She starts feeling that disagreements will not automatically become emotional chaos. That matters more than most men think. A relationship where someone constantly fears emotional explosions becomes emotionally exhausting over time. But a relationship where problems can be discussed calmly creates emotional relief. And emotional relief is incredibly attractive because it allows vulnerability to grow naturally. At the end of the day, conflict is unavoidable in every relationship. What truly matters is whether conflict creates fear, distance, and emotional exhaustion, or whether it creates understanding, growth, and emotional closeness. The men who build the deepest trust are often not the men who avoid conflict completely. They are the men who know how to remain emotionally grounded while going through it. 4. Keeping your word. One of the quietest ways trust is built in a relationship is through small promises being consistently kept over time. Many men think trust is only tested during major moments like betrayal, loyalty, or commitment, but in reality, trust is often shaped in ordinary situations. People barely notice in the beginning. It is built when you say you will call and you actually call. When you promise to handle something and you follow through without being reminded 5 times. When your actions stop forcing a woman to constantly question whether your words truly mean anything. Over the years, I have noticed something very important in relationship conversations. Many women emotionally disconnect long before a relationship officially ends, and one of the biggest reasons is disappointment piling up quietly over time. Not dramatic disappointment, repeated inconsistency. I remember hearing someone describe how she slowly stopped trusting her partner, even though he constantly claimed to love her. What affected her emotionally was not one huge event. It was the daily pattern of broken promises. He would promise quality time, then cancel last minute, promise emotional change after arguments, then repeat the same behavior weeks later. Promise support during difficult moments, then emotionally disappear when things became inconvenient. Eventually, she explained that she no longer felt comforted by his words because emotionally she had trained herself not to rely on them anymore. That is what many men fail to understand. Every broken promise teaches someone to emotionally depend on you less. A relationship becomes emotionally exhausting when one person constantly has to wonder whether the other person means what they say. And this is where many men unintentionally damage trust while believing they are doing nothing seriously wrong. Some people think small promises do not matter because they are not intentionally trying to hurt their partner. But trust is not built through intentions alone. It is built through reliability. A woman starts relaxing emotionally when she realizes your behavior matches your words consistently enough that she no longer has to second-guess your sincerity. One thing I often tell men is that reliability creates emotional peace. There is something deeply comforting about being with someone whose words feel stable. In relationships, uncertainty creates anxiety, while consistency creates safety. When a woman feels that your promises only exist in emotional moments but disappear in real life, she slowly becomes emotionally guarded. She may still stay in the relationship physically, but emotionally, she becomes more cautious, less vulnerable, and less trusting over time. What makes this important is that keeping your word is not only about large commitments. Sometimes the smallest moments shape emotional trust the most. For example, imagine a man who notices his partner has been emotionally drained from work lately. He tells her he will spend intentional time with her that weekend because he knows she needs emotional support. If he repeatedly chooses distractions, excuses, or convenience over that promise, she eventually stops believing emotional reassurance altogether. But if he consistently shows up, even in simple ways, trust deepens because she starts feeling emotionally prioritized rather than emotionally managed. At the end of the day, words become powerful only when behavior consistently supports them. Anyone can say comforting things during emotional conversations, but the relationships that become emotionally secure are usually built by people who understand that trust grows when promises stop feeling temporary and start feeling dependable. 5. Creating emotional safety. One of the deepest human needs in a relationship is the need to feel emotionally safe. Not judged, not constantly criticized, not emotionally manipulated, and not afraid to express feelings honestly. A lot of men misunderstand this because they assume emotional safety simply means being nice or avoiding arguments. But emotional safety goes much deeper than that. It is the feeling a woman gets when she knows she can be vulnerable around you without fear of humiliation, punishment, mockery, or emotional withdrawal. Over the years, I have noticed that many women do not fully trust a man until they feel emotionally safe enough to be imperfect around him. That is when the relationship usually becomes more emotionally intimate and real. I remember hearing someone describe a turning point in her relationship that completely changed how she viewed her partner. She explained that she had gone through a stressful period emotionally and was struggling to express herself clearly. She expected frustration, criticism, or emotional distance because that had been her experience in previous relationships. Instead, her partner stayed patient with her. He listened calmly, reassured her without dismissing her emotions, and did not make her feel weak for opening up. She said that moment stayed in her mind because for the first time in a long time, she felt emotionally safe instead of emotionally judged. That emotional safety slowly became the reason she trusted him more deeply over time. A lot of men unintentionally create emotional insecurity without realizing it. Sometimes it happens through sarcasm during vulnerable moments, sometimes through constantly minimizing emotions by saying things like, "You are overreacting," or "It is not that serious." Sometimes it happens through emotional inconsistency, where a woman never knows whether her feelings will be met with care, irritation, or cold silence. The problem is that repeated emotional discomfort teaches someone to hide parts of themselves around you. And once someone stops feeling emotionally free in a relationship, emotional distance slowly begins to grow. Something important men need to understand is that emotional safety does not mean agreeing with everything a woman says. It means handling emotional moments with enough maturity that she still feels respected, even during disagreement. A woman who feels emotionally safe around you will communicate more honestly because she is not constantly preparing for emotional backlash. She will feel more connected because she does not have to hide her fears, insecurities, or difficult emotions just to keep peace in the relationship. That level of openness only happens when trust exists. In many relationships, emotional safety is built through very small, repeated behaviors. The way you respond when she is anxious, the way you speak during misunderstandings, whether you embarrass her vulnerabilities later during arguments, whether you listen carefully or dismiss her quickly. These moments may seem small individually, but emotionally, they leave lasting impressions. Women often remember how a man made them feel during emotionally sensitive moments far more than men realize. One thing I have consistently noticed is that emotionally safe relationships tend to last longer because people feel accepted instead of emotionally guarded all the time. A woman who feels emotionally protected around you gradually stops feeling the need to constantly defend herself emotionally. And when that happens, trust grows naturally. Not because you forced it, controlled it, or demanded it, but because your behavior consistently showed her that her emotions were safe in your presence. 6. Respecting her vulnerability. One thing many men do not fully understand is how much courage vulnerability actually takes in a relationship. When a woman opens up emotionally, shares insecurities, admits fears, talks about painful experiences, or reveals parts of herself she normally keeps hidden, she is placing emotional trust in your hands, and the way you respond in those moments can either deepen the connection or quietly damage it. Over the years, I have heard many people describe moments where they emotionally pulled closer to someone simply because they felt emotionally protected after being vulnerable. I have also heard the opposite, where someone slowly became emotionally distant because their vulnerability was mishandled, mocked, ignored, or later used against them during conflict. Those experiences stay with people much longer than most men realize. I remember hearing someone talk about a difficult period in her relationship where she finally opened up to her partner about certain emotional insecurities she had carried for years. She explained that she was terrified of being misunderstood or seen differently afterward, but what made her trust him more deeply was the way he handled the conversation. He did not rush to judge her. He did not make the conversation about himself. He did not expose her vulnerability later during arguments just to gain emotional control. Instead, he remained calm, patient, and emotionally reassuring. She said that experience changed the entire emotional dynamic of the relationship because for the first time, she felt safe being fully honest without fearing emotional consequences afterward. A lot of men unintentionally damage trust because they treat vulnerability carelessly. Sometimes they dismiss emotional openness because it makes them uncomfortable. Sometimes they joke during serious moments to avoid emotional depth. Other times, they listen in the moment but later weaponize private insecurities during disagreements. That kind of behavior creates emotional fear inside a relationship because it teaches a woman that opening up emotionally may eventually be used against her. Once that fear develops, vulnerability usually decreases. She may still communicate on the surface, but emotionally, she starts protecting deeper parts of herself. What many men fail to notice is that women often test emotional trust quietly, not through games, but through small moments of openness. She may reveal a fear, an insecurity, a painful memory, or something deeply personal just to see how emotionally safe it feels to be honest around you. Your reaction matters more than perfect words. Sometimes emotional maturity simply means listening without judgment and allowing someone to feel understood instead of exposed. A woman who feels emotionally respected after opening up becomes more emotionally connected because vulnerability no longer feels dangerous around you. Something I often explain is that vulnerability is the doorway to real intimacy. Without it, relationships stay emotionally surface level no matter how long two people stay together. But vulnerability cannot survive where emotional punishment exists. If someone constantly fears criticism, ridicule, emotional coldness, or manipulation after opening up, they eventually stop sharing honestly altogether. That is why respecting vulnerability is one of the strongest ways to build trust over time. At the end of the day, trust grows when a woman realizes that her emotional openness is safe with you. Not temporarily safe during romantic moments, but consistently safe over time. A man who respects vulnerability with maturity, patience, and emotional care creates an environment where emotional intimacy naturally becomes stronger. And in many relationships, that emotional safety becomes the reason trust continues growing even during difficult seasons together. 7. Being honest about your intentions. One of the most emotionally confusing experiences for many women is dealing with a man whose intentions constantly feel unclear. And honestly, confusion destroys trust faster than most men realize. A woman can handle difficult truths far better than emotional uncertainty stretched over time. Over the years, I have noticed that many relationship problems begin long before arguments, betrayal, or emotional distance. They begin the moment someone starts feeling unsure about where they truly stand emotionally. When words, actions, and intentions stop matching consistently, trust slowly begins to weaken because emotional security disappears alongside clarity. I remember hearing someone describe a relationship that looked healthy on the surface, but emotionally left her constantly anxious. She explained that her partner was affectionate sometimes, emotionally distant other times, and avoided direct conversations whenever the relationship became serious. She spent months trying to decode mixed signals instead of feeling emotionally secure. What affected her most was not even the uncertainty itself, but the emotional exhaustion of constantly questioning his true intentions. She said something powerful that stayed with me. I trusted him less because I never knew which version of him I was going to get emotionally. That emotional inconsistency slowly made her feel disconnected even before the relationship officially struggled. A lot of men think keeping intentions vague gives them more control in relationships. They avoid emotional clarity because they fear pressure, commitment, vulnerability, or losing freedom. But what they often do not realize is that unclear intentions create emotional instability. A woman starts paying attention not just to what you say, but to whether your actions consistently support your words. If you speak about care but behave inconsistently, confusion grows. If you speak about commitment but avoid emotional responsibility, doubt grows. Over time, emotional doubt becomes emotional distance. Something important men need to understand is that honesty builds trust, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Emotional maturity is not about saying whatever sounds good in the moment. It is about communicating clearly enough that someone does not feel emotionally misled by your behavior. Women often feel safer around men who are emotionally direct because clarity creates emotional stability. A man who communicates intentions honestly allows a woman to emotionally relax instead of constantly analyzing mixed signals and hidden meanings. One thing I have consistently observed is that trust grows when a woman feels your emotional presence is genuine rather than strategic. Some men try so hard to appear desirable that they become emotionally performative. They say things they do not fully mean, promise emotional consistency they cannot maintain, or create artificial emotional intensity early on. But eventually, reality exposes inconsistency. And once someone feels emotionally manipulated or emotionally confused for too long, rebuilding trust becomes difficult. In strong relationships, honesty creates peace. A woman who understands your intentions clearly feels less emotional anxiety because she no longer has to constantly question your motives. That does not mean every relationship will be perfect or free from challenges, but emotional clarity creates a stronger foundation for trust because it removes unnecessary confusion. At the end of the day, most women are not expecting perfection. They simply want emotional honesty strong enough that they can believe the connection they are investing in is real. And when a man consistently communicates with sincerity instead of emotional games, trust naturally becomes stronger over time. In the end, trust is not built through grand moments, speeches, or temporary emotional intensity. It is built slowly through consistency, calm behavior, emotional awareness, honesty, and respect over time. A woman does not simply trust what you say, she trusts what you repeatedly show her when no one is watching and when emotions are not at their highest point. If your actions stay aligned with your words, if your presence feels emotionally safe, and if your intentions are clear, trust stops being something you chase and becomes something that naturally grows around you. That is the foundation of every strong relationship.